This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
This week's ChangeMaker is Marshall Crawford, the president and CEO of the Housing Fund. Marshall's career in housing includes his time as president of Housing and Multifamily Development for Community Ventures Corporation and senior director for the Southern region of NeighborWorks America. Marshall, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to have some dialogue with you today.
You've been named Most Admired CEO by the Nashville Business Journal in 2019, 2020, and 2021. You've been inducted into the Affordable Housing Hall of Fame by the Housing Commission. Very prestigious recognition. We are so honored to have you here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And all of those accolades make me sound like I'm about to retire or something.
Well, I mentioned that because before we get started, I want you to tell us a little bit about your journey into affordable housing, maybe how or why you got started here.
Well, it's an interesting journey, and it actually started out of college. I actually spent 5 years in the military, and I was stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky. So when I got out of the military, I went to Western Kentucky University, and interesting enough, I decided to major in finance. And during that time in my senior year, I had an option to take an additional class or to write a senior thesis, and I chose to write a thesis. And that thesis was on disparities in mortgage lending. And so it gave me a very keen insight to the difficulties that people of color had in being able to obtain a mortgage. There are, what I call rules, and then there are exceptions to those rules. And for the most part, people of color were always told just the rules and never the exceptions to the rules. And so from there, I decided to go into banking so that I could help a lot more people become much more aware of what those exceptions to those rules were. Banking opened up my eyes in so many different ways, and that in fact, not only did I work for a bank, but then I became a bank examiner years later, in which I got an opportunity to really dig deep into the very essence of how banking operates. And so after a couple years as an examiner, I got into the nonprofit space, working for NeighborWorks America, who gave me some insights on organizations that help people understand the exceptions to those rules, which led me then to being hired by one of our clients in the nonprofit space to come and do more in mortgage and homeownership development. And then I was recruited by the Housing Fund to come in and run its organization, and it's gone on 5 years come June. So it's been a very interesting journey, but a journey that I have relished very much and continue to do so.
When many people have realized the connection between home ownership and economic development and economic advancement. And so you're unveiling something so crucial there in the banking industry to be able to get loans and approved and, how to navigate that system. So, it's something that I think that many people are becoming aware of, that there have been barriers and obstacles. Do you see that today, fast forward now to where you are, do you see that today that we've made progress or not enough progress? I mean, can you generalize there for us now that we've ventured into this topic?
It's interesting that you say that because the Housing Fund was created back in 1996. And it was created because Nashville was addressing an affordable housing crisis. Well, interesting enough, here we are in 2022. And we still have an affordable housing crisis. And the reason for that, and a lot of times my talking points consist of, affordable housing has to do with two spectrums. One is income, the money that people make, and number two is the profitability, what somebody needs to make in renting a property or they want to sell a property. And all of those aspects continue to provide us with a sense that progress, while it has been made, it has not been made far enough because the income levels of people is not enough for them to keep up with, what they call inflation or capitalism, for the simple fact that people are trying to maximize as much as they can out of their assets, and that's those are homes or apartment buildings that they own. Those are assets, and they're trying to maximize that. But the income levels of individuals just can't keep up with it, especially when you put debt on top of, what they're trying to accomplish there. So when we look at what the banking industry and how they have played a major role in all of this, I give them a lot of credit for the progress that they have made. But what we'll see is that there is so much more that needs to be done. The banking industry partners, they are our investors in the housing fund and other community development financial institutions, or CDFIs. So they make a yeoman's effort in trying and giving us the resources that we need to be able to help address some of these issues. But as you know, the issues just continue to magnify because of decisions that individuals make, and then also the decisions that the owners of those properties and those resources, the decisions that they make, that make it even more difficult for individuals.
So you're the CEO of the Housing Fund, which, like you mentioned, is a community development financial institution. And we've had a couple of other CDFIs on our podcast. But for listeners of this particular episode who may not have heard of a CDFI, explain what that means for your organization.
So CDFIs are organizations that were created to serve the low to moderate individuals and communities. And many of them provide a different array of products to be able to serve those individuals in those communities. CDFIs are comprised of 5 different types of CDFIs, one being community development corporations that do housing development, and they also get the designation of a CDFI. And you know what? Let me just start and say that CDFIs are designated by the Department of the Treasury. So you have to go through a process and you have to submit an application, and then they determine your designation of a CDFI. If you are a CDFI, you are required to provide 60% of your products and services have to serve 80% and below area median income. So a lot of CDFIs, as that particular requirement, seek out to making sure that they're providing those services. So now let me just say there are 5 types of CDFIs that are designated. One is community development corporations. 2 are banks and credit unions. They are also can get the designation of a CDFI. And then you have capital venture corporations can also seek a CDFI designation. And then you have CDFIs that focus on small businesses. And then finally, the type of CDFI that we are at the Housing Fund is a revolving loan fund, and meaning that all of our resources that we put out, when they come back, we turn around and put them out again. And so you have those various designations and different types of CDFIs that serve different needs for low to moderate income individuals and communities.
So we're talking about Nashville. It is a hot market. It has been growing just even in the last 10 years. What is happening for people who are in that, 80% and below average median income? What is happening for them in the homeownership space and the rental space? Give us a glimpse.
Yeah, so it's as you can imagine, it's very difficult. Nashville is a very growing city. I first lived here in Nashville in 1996. And when I moved here, my first apartment, I was able to get a 1-bedroom for $425. There's nowhere, not even an efficiency, not even a room where you can find a place for $425 these days. But it's really about the growth of the city. The city has grown in a way that it really has outpriced a lot of, low to moderate income individuals. The housing prices have gone up tremendously from a ownership side, and then it has also gone up tremendously from a rental side. And the reason being is that there are so many more people that actually want to live in Nashville now. And at one point, several years ago, there was over 100 people a day moving to Nashville. And while that happened prior to the pandemic, I think even the pandemic even increased, the growth element or the desire to be in this particular city, especially when you have individuals who can work any place and live any place now. So if you have individuals who lived in New York and now worked in New York, now they can still work in New York but live in Nashville because of the remote working situation. And that has exacerbated the situation even more so with more people here. But the challenge is because of the lack of a sophisticated transit system, it makes it difficult for a lot of people because everybody now wants to live close to their jobs in the downtown Nashville area. And with that being the case, supply and demand has become a critical issue, meaning that the demand for a home that someone bought for less than $100,000 is now being attracted by somebody coming out of New York or Chicago or California, and they can buy that house unseen, uninspected for significantly more. And a lot of those homes are going at $300,000 and $400,000, whereas that used to be the affordable housing stock, but now that stock no longer exists for low to moderate income individuals. And it's the same thing on renting apartments. Individuals, the majority of the housing stock that is rented to individuals are owned by, normal everyday people as well. And they used to live in that house, and when they decided to move, instead of selling that home, what they did was decide to keep it to supplement their income, and now they're renting that property. Well, if you have people coming in that have higher incomes that want to live close to downtown, well, they're willing to pay market rate for that unit. And what that does is it pushes out an individual at 80% and below. Now they can no longer afford that. And then individuals that already live in that housing stock, landlords are saying, hey, we can get more. And why? Because property taxes are increasing. And we know that is the primary source of revenue for major cities across the country, and no different than here in Nashville. So what they're interested in is really, if I got to pay higher property taxes, then I got to raise rents. And what it does is outprice that 80% and below area median income individual. What it does, it forces them to move further outside of the city. What it does with gas prices now going up the way it is really increasing the cost burden on really trying to buy a house or even rent a house within the Nashville market.
Well, and that has obvious implications for their own profitability, their ability to save, pay down debt, make a down payment. And so, it just keeps them in that cycle so much longer. And I've been amazed every time I've been to Nashville. I mean, the last time I counted construction cranes, and there were more construction cranes than I had seen in Washington, D.C. the last time. This boom is really unreal for Nashville. Predicting how long the market can sustain that is one thing, but what you guys are doing with the housing fund, you are trying to stabilize some of that supply. And the first time I heard of the housing fund was when you guys were completing a couple of homes through the Community Land Trust. And we have not covered land trusts on our podcast, so you're the first. How is that tool working for affordable housing?
It has been a major tool for a number of years. I mean, it started so long ago as a part of an opportunity for, African Americans who own land to try to, savor their land and their investment in that particular land. And so for years, when I worked with NeighborWorks America, I had an opportunity to work with a number of organizations across the country that were establishing these community land trust models. And it's a way of trying to preserve affordable housing through perpetuity. And so what does that mean? That means that organizations own the land, and then what they do is that they ground lease that land to an individual who essentially buys the structure of it. So the individual will own that particular structure. The organization maintains. What does that do? That means that when the individual moves, they can knock down, sell that house, and outprice low to moderate income individuals. And so it really provides, again, an opportunity to ensure that the housing stock is preserved, and we're not dealing with the issue like we are now with supply and demand. So the community land trust model allows us to preserve those affordable units. Grounded Solutions, which is pretty much what you would call the trade organization that governs and provides support to so many community land trusts across the country, has been a great partner in giving us the guidance and the understanding of how we operationalize a community land trust. For the most part, most community land trusts are separate 501c3s that are able to build houses and rent houses at scale that allows them to sustain their operations. For here at the Housing Fund, it is really just a program. And the reason being is because it's very early, it's very new to the Nashville market, and we didn't want to create a separate organization that we didn't know if we could scale it. And so we just recently, finished our first build, community land trust property. We partnered with another nonprofit organization known as Be a Helping Hand, and their CEO, Mark Wright. He's been building affordable housings for a number of years. And so for us to be able to partner with another nonprofit who understands the magnitude of what we're trying to do just made sense for us and makes sense for Nashville. So they were able to give us a cost-effective home that is really a market rate house that we were able to sell to a worthy low to moderate income homeowner at an affordable price. And it's a 3-bedroom, two and a half bath, 2-story unit that just if you looked at it, you would never know that it's considered a community land trust property or that it's affordable housing. It looks just like any other housing on that street or in that community, we're not trying to separate it from anything else. What we're trying to do is provide a beautiful home to whereas an individual of a certain income level can actually afford to be able to live in that community and afford that particular unit as well. So we're excited about it. We have several other properties that are being developed right now. We have a partnership with Moody Nolan, the largest African American architectural firm in the country, and they are actually building a house that is a part of their legacy program, and they're donating the unit back to the Housing Fund, and we'll find a low to moderate income individual who would be very happy to live in that particular community in that particular house as well. So the Community Land Trust is just one other tool in the toolkit that allows us to continue to address the issue of supply and demand and also preserving affordable housing units.
How do you see demand happening? I mean, there's going to be a floodgate of people interested, and how do you see that evolving?
Yeah, well, you know what? That would be the best problem we would have. But the way society is today, housing is a very interesting, has a very interesting perspective of why people buy homes today and what they try to do with those homes today. So the community land trust model, just like the shared equity model, it forces you to look at housing through a different lens, meaning that you don't own that unit outright by yourself, and then when there's a resale value on it, you have to be committed to wanting to share that equity with the next low to moderate income individual. Well, capitalism doesn't talk about anything about sharing. It's all about, how do I get the most out of it with anything that I have? And so it's a hard sell nowadays because individuals, buy a home for 100,000 and they can sell it for 500,000, that's a nice, windfall for them on the appreciation. Well, this right here says, you know what, we're asking you to look at it from a very different perspective, even with the market the way that it is today. Not everybody is knocking on our door wanting to buy a community land trust property because, again, everything about housing is about location, location, location. Well, these homes are in communities that, that have suffered from economic investment. And so what we're trying to do is put it back in there, but it also comes with, some challenges and some issues in that community. And until we're able to address all of those issues, not everybody wants to live in that particular neighborhood or that particular school district or be a food desert. So we have our challenges in trying to promote it and promote it in a way that says to individuals, you know what, here's a way for you to be able to afford, but we ask that you stick with us and that you work with us so that we can help revitalize this community. Because in my mind, gentrification happens when the lack of a revitalization plan for that community exists. So what we're doing is saying, let's be a part of the revitalization so that the people who want to live there or that do live there can have an opportunity to continue to live there. But instead of renting, here's an opportunity to buy as well. So that's what we're looking at, and those are the challenges that we may face from people who might be interested or individuals who lack an interest because they don't want to share the appreciation or the value. All I say is let's look at it through a different lens, and we can help you achieve home ownership or an affordable rental if you're willing to work with us.
That's really wonderful to hear. And on that note, let's take a break. But coming up in the second part of my conversation with Marshall Crawford, Marshall talks about the collaboration between the Housing Fund and e-commerce giant Amazon.
When it came time to looking at, how do we partner, who do we partner with, for what reason do we partner, and what are the issues that we want to partner about? And so we put our brains together and came up with the Housing Resiliency Fund.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.